Hey everyone. Recently I managed to finish the game and get all the achievements, so I just wanted to go start making some guides for the last final bosses. I'm going to start with the true ending final boss, and I'll probably make one for the normal ending as well as like the super boss later. But for those who are not familiar with the way I style my guides, I'm going to start out with kind of going over the important equipment and mention some of the special characters, and then show the fight afterwards and explain things throughout the fight. There will be in the description timestamps in case you need to skip to something specific, and obviously with there being so many different characters and so many different items and abilities, it's hard to make a really specific guide for this fight in particular. So the guide is going to be set up in a way that should work with any team. It's going to give very generalist advice, and it's going to be designed for people that maybe they didn't level up a lot of their other characters and they keep dying in the fight. I've seen that that's like a big problem, but this particular strategy should be able to remove that issue and allow you to just power through it with the characters you did focus on. So let's go ahead and get started, and we'll talk about the important gear and equipment that you'll want to bring into this fight. So first and foremost, before we get into anything, a big part of how this strategy is going to work is going to require that you get your ultimate back. So if you've gotten to this point in the story, I'm sure you've noticed that you lose your ultimate, and maybe you already know this, but just in case you don't, to get your ultimate back, you're going to want to come here to the Flamebearer Shrine. I'm actually going to show you exactly where you need to go. So you're just going to want to come up here, and there's going to be there's supposed to be like a little dialogue box whenever you come up to the area you have to go to. You won't see it on mine because I've already gotten the ultimate back, but you're just going to go up to this giant flame here, and there'll be like a little dialogue box, and if you talk to it, they will give you your ultimates back so you can use it in the next fight. So first, before we really get into the gear side of things and special abilities, I'm going to go over some of the more important characters and why they're important, as well as some honorable mentions that are really going to help out. So the big one is going to be Reime, how it's pronounced in Japanese anyway. As you've probably heard, she's an absolute powerhouse, and if you're not using her, especially in a fight like this, well, let's just say I highly recommend it. She doesn't have to have like a lot invested into her to just get a ton of damage, and that's really going to be her main goal here. She is just going to basically delete things out of existence. So you definitely are going to want her. Corinda is another really important one, mostly just because of her ultimate. You do not need her to really have anything fancy. Her ultimate gives everybody physical attack up, but more importantly, it gives them a ton of sidestep stacks, which allows you to just ignore physical attacks, the physical counters and all that good stuff. So it's just a lot of value from one singular ability. The next is going to be Pius. Now, you may only get a chance to use him once or twice, but the good thing about Pius is very similar to Corinda. It's really just all about his ultimate. You use the ultimate, it's going to mega debuff the defenses of all enemies, as well as give everyone both elemental and physical attack up. So it's a really easy way of just getting all your buffs up without having to take extra turns for that. Now the next big one, and this is debatably more important than anyone, honestly, is going to be Fen. Fen has one of the most busted ultimates in the game, and I'll show you exactly why. He is going to be what allows your characters that maybe are at level 20 that have 1,000, 2,000 health to survive. And his ultimate pretty much just makes your whole team practically immortal. And you'll see that in play when we actually get to the fight, but you're definitely going to want to have him. He's just going to be for using his ultimate. He doesn't need to do damage. Literally, anytime it's his turn, he's using his ultimate. So you don't have to worry about anything else. And very similarly is Lorana, which I think, is down here. She's very similar. You're going to be using her ultimate anytime it's her turn. Unless, you already have her ultimate applied to everyone. Her ultimate basically makes an entire row have auto-revive. And it's going to make it to where if anyone on that road dies, they're going to revive back at 100% health. So the first time she comes up, you just use it on your front line, and then the second time she comes up, you use it on the back line. And if you somehow end up going beyond that, you can then use it on, whichever line you need it. But to be honest with this strategy, the fight is very likely going to be over. Now, if you have Isla, I'm going to go ahead and mention him here as well, because Isla is what I call a lazy character. And what I mean by that is that Isla just nukes everything. He doesn't care. He's like, oh, I see that you're not broken. There's no debuffs. There's no buffs. I don't care. I'm going to do 99,000 to everybody. If you don't have him, it's not a big deal. In this guide, I'm actually going to show you everything without actually using him, just in case you didn't get him, because he is technically a secret character and people may not have him. But if you do have him, definitely use him, because he is a very easy, just huge AoE hit. Now, some of the other kind of honorable mentions that can do big damage that you're going to want to use. Zerk has a really good ultimate that is, we're going to kind of use later in the fight, that is going to do some damage, but also it's going to help to hit some weaknesses. Cyrus, very similar with his ultimate. Alexia is kind of like a baby Isla. She has a really good ultimate that just does a lot of damage. Ulbrich is very similar. He only hits one target, but he does hit really hard without too much setup. And then the very last one is going to be Eltrix. Her ultimate, because, you're not going to use her for damage. Her ultimate basically makes it to where she's going to jump in front of anyone that's getting single target attacked, but she's also just like really, really tough. So she can make sure that it allows you to attack into the boss even when he's countering, and she will take all that damage. And most likely she's going to be much higher level even if you didn't use her, because you get her much later in the game. So I do want to mention her, even though she's not a big damage dealer. She's going to help protect a lot of teammates. So next, we'll go ahead and go over the gear loadouts and how you kind of want to set up everybody. So before I really get into all the equipment side of things, I should have mentioned this earlier, but I'm sure you noticed that my characters are basically in the 70s and 80s. And I do want to go ahead and mention that that is not a big deal. It's not going to affect this guide. And just to really make that clear, you're going to see that anyone that is not on my, quote, primary team, with the exception of Finn and anyone that's using like blessing and disguise type stuff, they literally have no armor, no accessories, and I'll show that in just a second. So you don't need to worry about if your people are lower level, have lower health. I'm sure you've probably heard a bunch of times that it is all about gear, which it is. They will obviously be lower health, but because we're going to be using Finn, it's not going to be that big of a deal. The only thing that I will say is that if you do have characters that have like extremely low health, that like is like 1,000, you might want to put an accessory on them that gives them health, but for the most part, this is really going to work. So whoever you have on your main 8, it doesn't really matter, who your primary characters are going to be. This is the team that I tended to use. So it's whoever, you've been using throughout the game that you want to, prioritize in this fight. You want to make sure that they're going to be over here. Now, your main character, it does not matter what class he's on. You do want to give him some nice abilities, but for the most part, he probably won't even attack. Or she, I guess. They will pretty much just be using their ultimate the whole time. And speed will be an important stat for them. We'll go over the strategy later, but I just want to go over the equipment right now. So I do have one of my stronger swords. I do have multiple battle-tested swords, which if you do have a battle-tested sword, put it on Reme. But for him, I'm going to assume that you didn't get duplicates. And so I just have Stormblade. Doesn't really matter what they have, because like I said, they're not, with these weapons, they're not really going to be using them, but just in case. Obviously, if you are a different class, use whatever the best stuff is on that, but leave the sword for your big damage dealer. This stuff doesn't really matter unless you need speed. That's why I have some stuff on them that gives speed. You don't need the Fang of Ferocity. And this, I'm not even changing it, because again, this strategy is designed to work with any team. But obviously, feel free to put kind of whatever you want on them. What's going to be important is speed, but we'll go into that later. Now, obviously, Reme, If you have the battle-tested blade, put that on it. I am, for the purposes of this guide, just to, again, really make it clear that you don't need to be level 80 and stuff, I'm not going to use my battle-tested blades. I do have them, and their raised potency of physical attacks is massive, and I'm going to assume that you have every battle-tested weapon at this point. But again, I'm not going to use it, just to really make it clear that you don't need to have all the best stuff in the game. I do still have a pretty strong sword, but definitely give her your battle-tested. The spear doesn't actually matter. It's a really nice spear, but we're not going to end up using it. As far as anything else, really doesn't matter. I guess just kind of give her your best stuff. If you have Finisher's Claws, this is a side quest reward later in the game. I'm going to assume that you have it. If you have it, give it to her. If you don't, it's not a huge deal, but it is a lot of damage. Battle-tested blade gives even more, but if you have it, definitely use it. We have the Assistance Amulet, and obviously, if you're lower health, you're going to deal more damage. She doesn't have this right now because we're going to do some 1 HP strat or anything like that. This is purely just for health because she is a very important damage dealer. We do not want her dying in the fight. That is the only reason she has it. She probably won't even get to use the perk on it for the lower HP because she's probably going to be full health or close to it for most of the fight. So Richard literally does not matter. Richard is going to be one of my enablers. He is quite literally he exists to use a couple of items throughout the fight. Does not matter what you have on him. This could literally be anyone. Corinda, again, does not really matter what she has on them. You're going to see, obviously, all this gear. And again, I only have gear on these 8 because it was my core team, and my assumption is that you're going to have your best equipment on them. But again, she is only going to be using her ultimate. Stia is a backpack character. She's not really going to do anything this fight, to be honest. I've kind of always had her behind my main character just to make him immune to, status effects. But again, she could literally just have nothing. It doesn't matter. Therion, I use him for debuffing, and so I will use him for debuffing in this fight coming up. It doesn't matter what his weapons are. He is literally just going to be using debuff skills. Pius, same thing. He's going to be using his ultimate, and so if you want to give them survivability stuff because they are, important characters, obviously go for that. But again, just using his ultimate. And I'm pretty sure I mess up her name all the time, so apologies for that. But you're primarily just going to be using her to ignore weaknesses, and I'll show you what that means in the fight. Again, just survivability stuff is fine for her. She doesn't need anything fancy. Now, everyone else, you can see here, other than, say, like, for example, Blessing in Disguise, I do still keep that for people that are using stuff that utilize Blessing in Disguise. But as you can see, nobody down here has any equipment other than maybe Blessing in Disguise. The only exception is going to be Fen, because Fen is going to be really important. There's another Blessing in Disguise, but see, nothing. Fen, you're probably going to need a lot of speed on him because you need him to go third. And so going through everyone else, there's obviously, again, just nothing here. I do have random weapons put on everyone. The characters that I mentioned in the previous one, give them your strongest stuff because they're going to do the most. And obviously, at the very least, just hit the optimize all button on them to give them something. I don't recommend going into the fight like this, but just to more match, like, kind of like the defense levels, because you'll notice, like, on a lot of these characters, the defense levels are very low because they don't have any armor. This is just to really show you that with Fen's ultimate, you're really just not going to take hardly any damage. Your biggest factor is really just going to be health, but hopefully most of your characters are going to have enough health, and we'll go over how to get some more health on everyone in a little bit. But next, I do want to go ahead and go over the skills you want to use for everyone, but this one's going to be a lot faster than the gear. So for the skills, there's really not too many that you need to worry about. I do still technically have a lot of skills and support skills on everyone because on the save file, I was using that for the fight initially, but I won't actually be looking at any of my learned skills other than for like a couple of characters. Obviously, you should put stuff on those characters for the fight yourself, but just to reiterate that you don't need to use those on all of your other characters. We're not going to worry about what they have and what they don't have. Sometimes you may see things like Patience proc to get people extra turns, but it doesn't actually matter. Now, the very first thing you're going to want to do, you're going to go to Bargello, and you're going to make sure that a step ahead is turned off. If it is not turned off, it will screw up everything and mess up your turn order. By turning this off, you can make sure that you get the correct turn order at the stop of the fight, or start of the fight. That way, you can make your whole party practically invincible. Now, just to make it real quick, these are the skills that I had been using on my characters, but for this fight, main character doesn't actually matter. They're going to be using their ultimate their whole time, but if you want to give them damaging abilities, go for it. Deme, you do need to have surpassing power, and immeasurable power I would recommend. You should have a copy of immeasurable power. Surpassing power is going to come from Ulbrich. And surpassing power is really the only one that you're going to want on a lot of characters. Basically, the character list that I mentioned before, the stronger ones, put that on all of them just so you don't get capped at that 9,999, especially like Isla. And then immeasurable power, you should have at least one copy of it. I believe you get 2 guaranteed through the game, but I know you at least get 1. Definitely put it on her. She's going to want it. Doesn't matter what Richard has. He's just going to be using items. Corinda, you're going to want the Show Goes On, which you can get. You probably just have some laying around, to be honest, but you can get it from Primrose if you don't have it. Invigorate, Inspire will not matter, but the Show Goes On is really nice. Not necessarily guaranteed, but I'd recommend having it. Stia, doesn't matter. Therion, I'd recommend putting Eerie Smile, which you can get from after Bestower of Wealth, which at this point you've already completed it, so just go back to the Suffragia, or however you pronounce that city way down to the south in the desert, and you're going to want to go back to the palace, go to the right side of the palace, and there's going to be an old gardener you can path action to get this skill guaranteed, assuming you don't already have it, and then Inhibit Offense you can get from Heidne, I think is how you pronounce her name, the other thief character that's obsessed with rings, or you probably just have one laying around, to be honest. Therion, whenever he gets his turns, we're pretty much going to be using one of these two things, especially Inhibit Offense if you have like lower health characters, but that's really the only character that's going to be using learned skills. Pius doesn't actually matter. He's just going to be using his ultimate the whole time. And Sayorse, however you pronounce her name, again, doesn't actually matter. She's just giving her ultimate to one person, and that's really it. Everything else is really up to you. This strategy is going to be very straightforward and doesn't really require too much input. So I'm not going to go over all the random stuff I have on these characters, but I won't be really utilizing any of them. It's mostly just going to be using ultimates and abilities that are already built into their characters. Just remember, make sure that you turn off a step ahead on Bargello. So next, let's go ahead and cover the food you're going to want to use. Really, you want something that's going to give a lot of health. I recommend sauteed veal. It's a pretty easy one to make. You probably have that recipe. And the reason why is because for people that may have characters that have way lower health because they're like level 10 or 20, this is going to give you a lot of health. And then for your damage dealers, plus 15% physical attack and plus 10% elemental attack is definitely going to help a lot. So I would recommend this. The fight should be well over before turn 15. So this is what I would say is going to be your best bet in terms of food. So next, let's go ahead and go over the strategy we're actually going to use in the fight and how you make sure that the correct people are going to go first. So as I've mentioned a couple of times, we're going to use speed to determine how things work in the beginning. So as long as you have Bargello without step ahead turned on, you can guarantee the order in which people go at the very beginning because the first turn is always dictated by your speed stat exactly. So the way you want to have it is you want to have your main character go, followed by some character that is not Finn and not one of like the important characters we mentioned earlier, followed by Finn. And you really just want to use your equipment to make that happen. For my main character, you can also use nuts, obviously, to get the speed that you need, but you want your main character to be going first. So as you can see here, that my main character is going to have 478 speed. I have Richard, he's going to be my item user, And I have defined Splendor on him, so when he starts, he actually has 453 speed, which will go after him. And then if we go down to Fenn, Fenn is going to have 1 less speed than Richard, so he will go immediately after Richard. Now, it is okay if you have one other character that has like a faster speed than one of them, and they kind of go in between or even at the very beginning. You'll notice that for me, Sayors actually has such a high speed, she will end up going first with the way I set everything up. But just be careful. It's fine if one person does that, but you do not want to have 2 people getting into that mix. You can only have 4 people going on the first round, and you have to ensure that it's your main character, somebody that is, not important that's going to use the item, and then next is going to be Fenn. So you want to make sure that you have that. If you start the battle and you notice that the turn order is weird because like there's a couple of other people and it pushes like Fenn later on, just go back, change their gear. You could even put gear on them that decreases their speed just to make that happen. So next we'll go ahead and go over the lineup and how you want to set up things for the fight, and then we'll actually get into the fight. So you got everything set up, and you've turned off Bargello's A Step Ahead perk. So now we're going to go ahead and set up the lineup. So we'll let this little mini cutscene play out so I can actually change it. Now the big thing here is that with this party, some of these characters, like for example Therion, is going to be more important than other characters. So you're going to want to actually move them out from being behind, and you can just replace them with kind of non-important characters. Like I mentioned, Pius is going to be another important one. We don't really need Bargello for this. And then Sayors is also a really important one. I wouldn't swap out Alphen because Alphen does do good damage. Viator can do good damage, but Tressa is not going to be too helpful, so we'll go ahead and swap them out. And that's really all you have to do. You don't have to think about anything else, and we can go ahead and start the fight at this point because everyone is set up and good to go. And I'm just going to go ahead and skip this cutscene because I'm assuming that you have already seen it. Alright, and so you'll notice the turn order at the top. Like I mentioned before, Sayors actually went first. You may have noticed that her speed technically was lower. It's because of her weapon that she goes first. I don't actually care what she does, so I'm just gonna, defend with her. We really want the other characters to go. Now, to give a general idea of what you are trying to do in this fight, is you are going to be blasting him with ultimates, and for your really high damage dealing characters, you're going to prioritize killing the Void Sundering Arm, so the one at the top that is weak to weapons. Then we're going to get the Demonic Spear, and then obviously we're going to finish the boss off. So it's going to be kind of up to you because your speed and who goes when is going to kind of be all over the place. But anytime you get to the main character, you're always going to do what we're about to do here, and this is how you always start it out. You want to use your ultimate, we're going to go to Doters, and then we're going to use it on the person that's going next, which again for me is going to be Richard. I really love the music in this fight. And then for Richard, or whoever you decide to choose for this position, you're going to want to go down to your Reinvigorating or Rejuvenating, doesn't actually matter which, but since no one's hurt, you might as well just use the Reinvigorating. What this is going to do is this is going to give everybody their full ultimates as well as max BP. And then obviously Fenn's going to come up, we're going before everyone, and we're going to use Shield of Hope. Now I want you to try to pay attention to how much damage we're going to take here. Everyone has no armor or anything like that. The boss has not been debuffed. We don't have any buffs up to give us defense, and we're taking 300, 400 damage. And so that is really what's going to enable us to get through the fight. So you're going to let him do his stuff. We don't really care. Blah, blah, blah. And then when Corinda comes up, Corinda, you are always going to do her ultimate. This is going to make it to where you can ignore the physical attacks, and it's going to end up being really just elemental attacks. And then like I mentioned with Therion, he's the only one we're going to be using learned skills with. We're going to go ahead and inhibit offenses of the main body here. And the reason why is because we're really just waiting for Pius to come up. He's the one that's going to do a lot of the debuffing. Ulbrich is just going to hit for, you know, big damage. We don't need to do anything else. Again, I know that we don't have buffs up and stuff, but that's fine. You don't really need to worry too much about that. We're just waiting for Pius to come up. And then anytime Neme is up, you're always just going to Lotus Blade the next target. So it didn't matter that it was weak, or rather not weak to her attack. Still does massive damage. Again, we're taking 300 damage. It really doesn't matter. The reason Ulbrich's going here is because he has Patience. So now we're just going to do a max boosted cross strike on the arm. Again, we're just trying to whittle this one down and destroy it first. And he finished it. Nice. Yeah, the spear's going to shake, whatever. Now, Sazantos is going to come up next. Now, you notice that Laurana is actually behind him. When Laurana comes up, you want to use her ultimate on the front row. This is the one that'll make it to where if anyone does die, they'll just stand back up at 100% health. Alright, and so now we got Zerk. Zerk is one of the ones that you're just going to use his ultimate every time, anytime he's up. It's good for break-in, does decent damage. Again, keep in mind, we haven't even done any sort of, like, defense debuffs or anything. You could be setting up your turn order to optimize for that. You could be using summon companions. And you'll notice that we attacked into the counter and took basically no damage. I haven't even cast healing on anyone yet. So it's funny how broken Fenn's ultimate is. Now we have Pius up, so with Pius, he's one of those, we're always just going to use his ultimate whenever he's up. Now we actually have a defense down on them. It would have been nice to have that earlier, obviously. You can put more speed on him for that, but again, for the purposes of this, we're not worrying too much about that. Viator, his ultimate's nice, but we're just going to hit with Talon Strike. We don't really care. Well, actually, let's go ahead and do Vanguard Spear so we can specifically target this arm, because, again, we're just trying to destroy the arms. It's fine that he doesn't do that much damage. We don't really care. And that was a physical attack, so they just missed because of the ultimate we used earlier that gives everyone sidestep. Anytime Alexia's up, we're going to use Ancient Magics. Obviously, I can see Isla there is going to be technically coming up, but I'm not going to use them. So 52,000 damage, and she doesn't even have any accessories. It's kind of crazy. With Macy, I usually just use her ultimate, because, you know, random buffs, you know, maybe something cool happens. She doesn't really do that much damage. At least with this setup, she doesn't. So I could use Isla. If you have Isla here, just use his ultimate. You will absolutely destroy stuff. But since we are not wanting to do that, we'll just, I don't know, pick something like this, max boost into the spear. Again, we're just trying to kill the spear. We don't really care. Hanet is a pretty good damage dealer, so she's one of the ones that you're going to want to use her ultimate. I believe she is the one that actually has my battle-tested bow, but see, counters does practically nothing. So he just purged off all of his debuffs, unfortunately, but we don't really care. There's all the misses. Now, for Eltrix, I would recommend using her ultimate, again, so she can jump in front of people. Alright, and we're coming up to Alphen. With Alphen, I would recommend just using Vigorous Strike. It does reasonably good damage. He's actually a good person to give your battle-tested axe to if you have it. Yeah, whatever. And then Saors, whenever she is back up, you're going to want to use Ruinous Aura on Neme. Now everything she hits is a weak point hit. Alright, and we've cycled all the way back to our main character. We're going to do the same thing as last time. You'll notice that Richard is coming up next on the next turn. So we're going to Dotard Charity him. Wait for him to do all of his attacks. With Richard, we're just doing the same thing. We're going to go down, except this time, we're going to go ahead and use a rejuvenating, because now people have taken damage. So we'll do that. It does the same thing before giving everyone their ultimates back, but now everyone's at full health. We're getting back to Finn. Our buff is off, so now Finn is just going to reapply it. And we literally are just going to cycle through this. This is pretty much going to be the entire fight. Obviously, if you give people gear and you optimize, especially if you get Pius in there early to use his ultimate for the debuffs, really, really strong. So again, Therion's back up. I'm actually just going to debuff the boss again. He'll purge them off from time to time, but it's not really a big deal. And there we go, hitting for 300 damage on characters that have literally no armor. Alright, Ulrich's back up. We're just going to Unbending Blade. And now, it sucks that we're using a Lotus Blade on this, but she's going to finish it easily. Alright, and then the main bodies... Oh, yeah, so now that we're back to Lorana, you want to use Maiden's Miracle on the back row because they don't have the revive. And now we're just waiting. The boss only takes 1 damage. We have to actually wait until the next turn. So there's no point in actually, like, doing anything. If you want to debuff here, you can, but there's no point. We have to wait for him to become vulnerable again. Or, not again, but just in general. Alright, so now he is back up. We have Pius up, so we're going to go ahead and do the debuffing. I know he does technically have like his super attack that's going to be coming up, but Finn's ultimate should protect us from that. And even if it does kill people, you already have revive on everyone. They're just going to stand back up, so who cares? Now, I'm going to go ahead and use a... where is it? I believe... Oh no, she does not. I am going to go ahead and just use a heal. People have taken a little bit of damage. And then, anytime she's up, we're just using her ancient magics. This fight would have already been over had I been using Isla or if I had been using the battle-tested blade. But again, this is designed, for people that may not be dealing as much damage. It's really convenient how consistent this is. Finn's ultimate really is just crazy busted. Oh no, he's countering elemental. So this is his super attack is coming up. Again, I just don't care. So we will go ahead and just we'll go ahead and just use this. We're just trying to squeeze in damage when we can. We do not care at all about breaking him or about his ability. Anytime Hanet's up, use her super. It's a fairly strong base damage one, so even if you don't have, like, crazy damage on her yet, she still does a lot. Altrix is up, so we'll use her ultimate again, so she can jump in front of people if needed. She doesn't block the AoE attacks, obviously, but, still. Alphen, we're just going to Vigorous Strike again. Pretty much the fight is going to end whenever we get back to Deme. That's pretty much what we're waiting for. Alright, we technically don't need a Ruinous Aura. Or maybe we do, I don't remember if it's up because the turn order's very wonky, but just in case, go ahead and, use it on Deme again. Okay, now that we have cycled all the way back through, we're just doing the same thing again. I probably could just attack with the main character here, but why risk anything? Let's make sure we reapply Finn's buff before this... well, actually, I don't think we will be able to apply the buff before the ultimate comes in, but that's not a big deal. Doesn't actually matter. Again, if people die, they're just going to get picked back up. So you could technically use a rejuvenating or a reinvigorating. I'll just use a reinvigorating. I know some people are injured, but who cares? So here's the Eternal Grudge. It did a lot of damage because Finn's ultimate was not up, but because we had the revives, didn't matter. They just stood back up. So even if the timing is weird, because he basically starts charging that attack after you break the arms. If you break them faster, it will hit you while Finn's ultimate is up, and it'll deal like 500 damage instead of like 4 to 5,000. But again, you know, Laurana saved the day. Oh no, he's trying to charge it again. We're going to Trick of the Trade. Again, mostly just for the sidestep stacks. The fight is pretty close to being over. Since Therion's up, I see that he does not have... He purged off some of his buffs, or rather debuffs, so we're actually just going to use a regular old Armor Corrosive, and that's because we have some really big physical damage dealers coming up, so Ulbrich being one of them. And then this is very likely going to be the end of the fight right here. If not, again, it's not a big deal. We just keep cycling through until they die. Again, that would have been it had we been using the battle-tested blade. Oh, actually, never mind. That was the fight. I forgot it still plays out all that stuff. And that's the end of the fight. It's going to do some dialogue here. I'm just going to kind of skip through it because in case you haven't seen it for yourself, I don't want this to, like, you know, spoil anything, so go ahead and leave if you don't want to see the end. But the fight is over at this point. I will continue the video until the very end, but if you don't want to see what happens, feel free to leave now. The fight is already over. So, I'm just going to wait around for all the cutscenes. I like how they did this last part. I was really surprised to see them like have a redemption thing for Sazantos. For those that have not played the mobile game, this plays out a lot differently in the mobile game. You can't save Sazantos, and this fight isn't even there. The normal ending is the only ending. But like I said, the fight's technically already over. I'm just waiting for the dialogue to play out. And then you do, the only thing you can do is a new super move, an Indestructible Flame. And so, it's going to do this nice little animation, we're going to blast him, and that'll be the end. There you go. So, if you've stuck with it this far, you can literally just use that strategy. It should work pretty much all the time. There's so many fail-safes between Finn's ult and Laurana's ult that as long as you have those three going first to make sure that you can just tank everything, you don't have to worry about breaking anybody, you don't have to do any of that stuff. You literally just keep laying into them with ultimates on like those important characters, and like I said, if you had used the battle-tested blade, you would have killed things. That fight would have ended a lot sooner. And if you use Isla, Isla can just nuke everybody for 99,000 damage if they're debuffed. But yeah, that's really it. There's not anything else to see, so hopefully you've made it this far and finished the fight, and I'll be putting out some more guides for the other ones in the coming days.